Hey everybody, and welcome back to another book review. I know it's been a couple weeks. I've been having some illness, so hasn't allowed me to focus or read. So I am back now, though. So catching up on books, and it is Black History Month. So reading some more books that are kind of geared into that vein. And so the first book for this month is James by Percival Everett. And if you're a person that likes a twist on stories, this would definitely be a good one for you. I do give it a 4.5 out of 5. It is there's a lot with it. So the story is about Jim from Huck Finn. So if you've read Mark Twain, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Adventures of Huck Finn, then you kind of know the backstory. And it's been a very long time since I've read either of those books. Yes, I do have copies of them, but they're from back when I was in school. So it's just been a long time since I've read the book. So there were parts of this book, James, I was like, was that in the in the first book or in the original book? But basically the idea is that it's telling the story of the adventures of Huck Finn from the perspective of Jim, who is the slave that runs away with Huck. And there's for the first part of the book, you spend a lot of time of it's Jim and Huck. And kind of going through a lot of things that you remember from the book, but just from a different perspective. And then the mid to latter half of the book is from Jim's perspective of what happened to him once Huck was gone. And so there's the story starts out back in Hannibal, the town where they're all from, and the reason that Jim takes off and the reason that he runs. There's a couple elements, though, to this character and the reason that the book is called James. The first is that it's playing on the idea of societal expectations of Black people, but especially enslaved populations in the 19th century at any point. And arguably, you could argue the same thing today. It's that concept of you talk white. Which I have gotten tons of times that I just speak white. And in reality, there is no speaking white because, one, we're speaking English. So there's just different dialects within the English language. But there are some dialects that are stereotyped and more race-based. And it's not to say that there weren't people in the world that didn't have that dialect. It's just that it became an expectation. And so a good chunk of the book is dealing with the fact that Jim is teaching his family, teaching his children to speak properly. This is how you speak English. But also telling them now code switch. So, when the overseer, when the enslaver comes around, this is how you would say something. And so it was a very interesting kind of angle to take because I just don't think about it a lot of times. And I do code switch. I think a lot of people code switch, and not just Black people. There are other minority groups that also code switch. But I think it was a very interesting concept because I just never thought about it from an enslaved perspective. And especially in his case, Jim is able to read, he's able to write. And so he's learned English from very high level books. And so he talks a lot about how things are ironic and how people assume that he doesn't know what irony is. So there's that. There's also a discussion about him being more light-skinned, not light enough to be white passing, but still lighter skinned. And so I think, and again, it's been a very long time since I've read Huck Finn, but I think in the original book he was just described as Black. There was no kind of up down in the spectrum. But I think that is also an interesting take of he wrestles with that concept of what his life would have been like if he was darker or if he was even lighter, light enough to pass. And this conversation kind of keeps going on, especially as he encounters other people. He runs into a minstrel group, and one of the minstrels catches on to the fact that he's code switching, and goes, "You can stop code switching. Like, I'm like you." And he's like, "What are you talking about? Like, you're white." And he's like, "No, I'm enslaved. I ran away. I'm just white passing." And so that's like another discussion point that kind of goes through the story. And especially along with the minstrel piece, there is a lot of conversation around the idea of what white folks expect out of black folks, which I think is a very deep conversation. It's a very loaded conversation. And I feel like the book really could have taken off in that direction a little bit more. But it's enough just to get you thinking, which is fine. But yeah, so in the end of the book, there is, and warning, spoiler alert, but there is a twist from the original story that I'm just not sure how I feel about it. So we know that Huck really struggles with his family. He lives mostly with Miss Watson. I can't remember what exactly the relationship is between him and Miss Watson, other than she's the one taking care of him, kind of like a foster care situation. But his father, or his pap as he calls him, is around, but is a drunkard, beats him a lot, and his mother has since passed on. And so later in the book, Huck talks about the fact that, like, hey, I keep disappearing from you, but I keep winding up back with you, Jim, and you're my friend, and I just feel, a close kindredship with you. And Jim's like, well, yeah, it's because I'm your dad. And I was just like, wait, whoa, pause. It's a stretch for me that Huck would be a mixed race child, but also light enough to pass as white. And Huck obviously has this kind of like struggle with this of the fact that he's like, okay, well, if Jim is actually my father, why doesn't he really want me around? Especially because the rest of the story, Jim is so focused on, I'm getting back to my wife and child, I'm getting back and I'm getting them free, and we're going to run north. And Huck keeps saying, but you don't want to take me with you. And Jim's like, no, like, you can stay here because you can pass. Which I also think is again, an interesting conversation. I just don't know if that's the angle that I would have gone with. I think everything else in the story was really good except for that one twist. And I was just like, that's why I can't give it a 5, because I just can't get behind it. They again in the story talk about how Huck's father just really dislikes him. And that's how Huck feels about it. But we only know how Huck feels about it. We don't actually know what his father feels about him. It's a plausible situation of, like, if he knows that Huck is not really his kid, and that Huck is potentially black, it makes sense. But like overall, I just couldn't get with it, and that was a real struggle for me. But yeah, so that's mostly why I didn't give it a 5. That aside, really good conversation starter. I am looking forward to having conversations with other people at school. This is actually a book recommendation from folks at school. We're all reading it at this time, and there's just so many conversations that can go with this, but especially reading it, but looking at it from a perspective of, like, I've experienced a lot of what Jim has experienced, not necessarily being enslaved and whippings and all that stuff, obviously, but just the idea that people assume, and I've talked about this before, but that people assume that, I talk too white, or that I'm not black enough. And in modern day, it kind of goes both ways. You have both sides of the spectrum of black people don't accept you when you talk correctly, when you use proper English, and white people are just like, why don't you talk like the rest of the black people? Why are you not ghetto? Why are you not this, that, or the other? And so that was just kind of nice to kind of think about. Like, I'm sure that in some way, shape, or form, that there were plenty of folks who were enslaved that actually spoke very well, and were probably judged in the same ways. And then, just also that concept of code switching, when you're with your people and how you sound versus when, you're with some other folks. My my best friend one time, she goes, I can tell you've been at church. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, you haven't switched back. I was like, oh. Which is not, a big deal between her and me. Like, we've known each other for so long that like it doesn't phase her anymore. But there are definitely people that have been like, are you okay? Like what? And it's just because of how you sound. But then, also those phrases of folks that are like, oh, you speak so eloquently. Like, what, you don't know how to speak the English language? Like, hello. So yeah, like I just really appreciated that, that side of things, that angle. I also really appreciated a lot of the visualization of the Mississippi River, which, until about 6 or 7 years ago, I had never actually seen the Mississippi River where I could remember it. I'd seen it, I think, when I was about 4, but I didn't really remember. But like seeing it as an adult, I was like, oh, this river is wild. And all we did was just drive over a bridge, but I was just like, where does it end and where does it begin? It's so vast, it's so wide. And at that point, there had been a very heavy rain, very heavy storm that had gone through. And so there was just flooding everywhere. And I was like, in my head, I was like, I could not imagine being out here in the early development of the US and people just like seeing that for the first time, and not knowing like how vast a river can flood. Just thinking about those kinds of things. I liked that imagery in the story of, there were multiple times where they were like, a rainstorm came through and we had to get to higher ground. A rainstorm came through and we had to back all the way up to this point, because if we didn't, the river was going to sweep us away. And then also talking about how rivers look calm, but there's always an undertow, or there's always something else, which I feel like was a allusion to life. Like life looks so calm and it looks like it's nice and easy, but there's always something underneath. It's an undertow, it's a deadly animal, like just those kind of things. So that was really nice within the story. So like I said, overall 4.5 out of 5. It is a really good book. Very good conversation starter. Really enjoyed it. I think there's rumors of it becoming a TV show or a movie, something along those lines. So I'd be very interested, I should say, to see if that comes to fruition, to see kind of where they go with that. I think it'd be a very interesting thing to watch, but I also think casting would be excessively hard. Like I really couldn't cast this one. Like usually I'm like, oh, this would be, and I'm like trying to think through people and I'm like, I ain't got nobody. So yeah. As always, like, comment, share, subscribe. If you've read this book, feel free to make some comments. Or if you're looking forward to reading it, make some comments. As always, if you like watching reaction videos, you can head over to my husband's channel. Here we just do book reviews. So if you're not into books, sorry about that, but that's what we do here. So yeah, I think that's about it, and I will see you in the next book review.